People who only know Dr. Seuss through his children's books are usually surprised to learn how strange some of his late life artwork was. The midnight paintings shown after his death drift into unsettling territory. Crooked creatures, tense compositions, shadows instead of bright colors. But there's a lesser-known rumor that circulates quietly among archivists and estate workers. A tale about a set of paintings even darker than those ones. A set that was never listed, never acknowledged, and never meant to be found by anyone. I heard about them from a woman named Claire. She worked for the Geisel, aka Seuss estate, for a few years doing archival stuff. We got coffee one afternoon and she told me this story. Not like she was trying to scare me or anything, more like she just needed to tell someone and I happened to be there. Anyway, she said there was this junior archivist a couple years back. She never told me his name, just called him the archivist. He got sent to one of the estate's smaller storage units to catalog some of Seuss's later work. Pretty standard job. Lots of sketches, unfinished pieces, stuff that was darker than you'd expect, but nothing too wild. Then around lunchtime, he found this box. It was wedged behind some larger frames, and the label in Seuss's handwriting said Observation Series, Do Not Open. Now technically he wasn't supposed to open anything that wasn't already in the system. But come on. You find a box that specifically says do not open and you're alone in a storage unit, of course you're opening it. At least to take a peek. Inside were 9 paintings, each one the size of a poster. The first showed Dr. Seuss's study. You could tell it was his workplace. The desk, the window with the view, everything arranged exactly how it looks in photographs. Classic Seuss style. Those curved lines he always did. However, there was a strange figure in the corner. Absurdly tall, like 9-10 feet. And so thin it almost didn't look real. It was almost like Cat in the Hat, but the proportions were all wrong. Its limbs too long, joints bending the opposite ways. The whole thing was kind of blurred into the shadows, painted with loose brushstrokes. Like Seuss was trying to make it seem unimportant, just part of the background. But once you noticed it, you couldn't stop looking. And where the face should be, there were just these black vertical lines. Thick strokes, deliberate, arranged close together like fingers pressed in front of a mouth. Or maybe like the slats of a Venetian blind, with something behind them trying to look through. Weird, but okay. I mean, Dr. Seuss did weird stuff. Then the archivist looked at the second painting. Same room, same everything, except the figure had moved. Not much, just a few inches closer. Its posture had changed too, like it had shifted its weight. Those long limbs repositioned slightly. And those lines on its face had separated, gaps forming between the vertical strokes. Like whatever was behind them had started to open up, to peek through. That's when he started feeling cold. Third painting. The figure was next to the desk. Fourth, hiding behind the easel. Fifth, standing beside the chair. Claire said the archivist's hands were shaking by this point, but he kept going. Sixth painting. The figure's leaning over where Seuss would have been sitting. Seventh, its hand was placed on someone's shoulder. Then the 8th painting. This one changed the whole perspective. Now you were looking from behind the chair, down at the back of someone's head. Seuss had painted himself at his desk, shoulders tense, hunched over his work, with the entity standing right behind him. The archivist really didn't want to look at the 9th painting, but his hands were already unwrapping it. It showed Seuss's face, taking up the entire frame. Eyes wide, mouth open, like he'd just seen something terrible behind him in a mirror. and hadn't decided if he should turn around yet. At the bottom in Seuss's writing was inscribed, "It learns attention." So the archivist wrapped everything back up, took some photos for documentation, logged it as restricted materials, and moved the box to a corner. He worked for a couple more hours, totally professional, and didn't look at it again. That night he sent everything to the estate coordinator. Next morning he got an email back saying there was no record of any observation series. Nothing matching that description existed. The coordinator asked if he was feeling okay and suggested he take some time off. He checked his files. Every single photograph was now corrupted. The files showed they'd been taken, but the actual images were just gray static. He went back to the storage unit the following Monday. The box was gone. When he asked about it, the coordinator said nothing like that had been logged. She implied pretty gently that maybe he'd been working too hard. And that could have been the end of it. But that night, he was doing dishes and caught his reflection in the kitchen window. The glass was old and kind of warped, and just for a second, there was something in the darkness outside. Something tall and narrow, just past where the porch light reached. He closed the blinds. Then it started briefly showing up in other places. Not constantly, just enough that he couldn't write it off. Bathroom mirror, phone screen, laptop. Always this tall shape in his peripheral vision. Always positioned like it was leaning forward to look at whatever he was doing. His sleep went to hell after that. He kept having this dream where he was sitting at Seuss's desk with something breathing behind him. He went back to the estate coordinator, asked her about Seuss's final years, whether he'd ever mentioned seeing things, whether there were other materials that had been deliberately left out of the archives. She looked at him like she felt sorry and said no, suggesting that he talk to a therapist about it. After that, he stopped asking. His work got sloppy. He pulled away from everyone. Then one Thursday, he just walked out mid-shift and never came back. Claire heard from a fellow coworker that he ended up in an asylum shortly after. However, he had called her at one point, telling her that the observation series was what Seuss actually saw in his last days. Something that showed up just in reflections first, then everywhere he went. A thing that got more real the more he paid attention to it. An entity with the sole desire to drive him insane. He then told them if the box with the observation series ever turned up again, leave it sealed. Some paintings shouldn't find out that you're looking at them. Then he hung up. Claire quit the job shortly after, saying the work didn't feel safe anymore. Lately, I think I've been seeing it too when I'm alone at night. Something tall and twisted, like a disturbing version of Cat in the Hat. And I'm starting to wonder if you even need to see the actual paintings for it to happen. Maybe just knowing about them can attract the thing to you. Then she looked right at me with a strange expression. I probably shouldn't have told you this. I laughed it off, said it was just a story. She didn't laugh. I haven't talked to Claire since. Tried calling once, but her number's disconnected. And I'm probably being ridiculous, but sometimes I feel like I catch something in the mirror behind me too. I keep telling myself it's just a trick of the light. A good story sticking in my head. I just can't stop thinking about that 9th painting. The one apparently showing Seuss's terrified face. And I wonder what a 10th painting would have looked like if he'd lived long enough to paint it. But I know I really don't want to find out.